giving access to the raw material of the culture then became our priority.
Welcome, everyone, to Bent Fig Media. I am your host, Yashar Shayan, and I'm joined today by Mohammad Rasoulipour, who has some really interesting projects that we're going to talk about. How would you define yourself? I think of you seem like you're an artist, you're a historian. I feel like there's technology involved with what your
Definitely
work.
not a story.
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for having me on the show, and I'm excited to get into some of these discussions around Iranian diaspora community and our culture, and how we could, with art, sort of bring out some of the beauties of our culture that has been overlooked or underrated.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do I define myself? I don't know. Probably artist would be the closest. I don't think I'm like not in a traditional sense, more of, combining technologies with visual arts and things like that. Um, don't think of myself as a historian at all. I do not have academic um uh, like I have not studied history and academic setups. It's just, a curiosity for a lot of Iranians or a lot of people who live without, their country. And I think that has been a curiosity for me personally since I've come to the United States. That wasn't there before. That who are we and where do we come from? And this started from a lot of the questions that you are asked as an Iranian, or honestly as any, Middle Eastern or a foreign person who lives in the United States. Where are you coming from? Like, there are stereotypes about you that you want to dismantle, and you want to go and study about where you came from to have the right answer to those and for yourself, to reshape your identity as an Iranian American, or an Iranian who is living in diaspora, which the numbers are increasing every day.
Yeah.
So taking those questions, and learning about where we come from, and then I think a few years ago, this thing that was sort of like a passion for me, then I thought about it, whether could these be put into a project where we are actually helping and giving tools to other people who can then find their identity and express themselves, and show a part of the beauty of the Iranian culture.
I love that. And it
Yeah.
is, I think, such a beautiful culture that is often the history of it and the beauty of it is often, I think, overlooked, and we're often just portrayed with these negative stereotypes of, either modern day Iran or some of the, less positive things that have transpired in Iran over the last several decades. And then just this incredible history, the richness of the culture is almost left out of the portrayal. And something that stands out to me with what you've done is there's often people say there are no new ideas or there's no good ideas in Hollywood. They're just making the same movies over and over again. And I look at what you've done and these stories that you are kind of recapturing and revitalizing. And I think here's a $1 billion movie right here. Just pick any of these
I
stories.
wish.
And if a major Hollywood studio wanted to do them and either tell the original or modernize it into a superhero style, Marvel-esque, DC-esque film. But these stories are just completely overlooked. Although I think some of the elements of these stories are baked deep into the roots of modern day mythology, like superheroes. And and we see constantly how famous stories that are famous in the West actually have roots in ancient Persian stories and ancient Iranian stories. So the roots are deep in there. They're not explored as much as I would like to see. But you and others like you, I think, are starting that journey, and hopefully, I'd love to see these start to become really mainstream as well, and explored deeper for a broader audience, not just for the Iranian diaspora. Um, you mentioned being curious about this, and I think curiosity is just such an important characteristic for us to have about our own history, about other cultures. And I think this is a beautiful way for us to explore our curiosities. You also mentioned kind of the importance of exploring where you come from. Do you want to share a little bit about, where were you born? How did you come to the US? Where are you now? If what would you like to share in terms of your own personal history?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was born in Tehran. Um, for a big chunk of my childhood, I lived in India. My family moved there when I was 5, and we came back to Iran when I was 10. So that's where I first went to English school, and I did some Farsi school as well. I did first grade to third grade both in both languages. Um, and going back to Iran at 10, I went to primary school for a couple of years, and then I went to middle school. But fast forwarding that, I came to the United States in 2009 when I was 19, and went for undergrad in a small college in northern Indiana. And this was around the time 2008, 2009 was around the time where political situation in Iran became very unstable. And I had an opportunity to go to a college in the United States, and I did. It was difficult to get there, but I did. I think the first sparks of me facing an Iranian identity from outside was really at that point. I remember in India, there was, sometimes when I got into a fight with kids, they would say, "Oh, go back to Iran," or whatever. So that, there was that was there. I was thinking of feeling as a foreigner, as an Iranian, was there as a child for me. And also back in Iran, when again we got into fights, I got into a lot of fights. Um, then again, they would say, go back to India. So so there was always this sense of sense of not necessarily like a yeah, there was always this sense of being an outsider in some ways, but also, not saying that that was the whole picture, but that was always in the back of the head. And then when I came to the US, I think, well, it was in September 2009. I got stopped at the airport. Back then there was like they would take you to another room, and they would look at your passport and say, you guys go over there. And then there's a room full of, people seen as dangerous in US in US Homeland Security's eyes. And so yeah, spent probably 3 hours in that room, just waiting, answering questions and things like that. I think that was the start of it. That, why are we separated? What did we do to deserve this? And I'm 19. I don't know what's going on. And so um, that was the start of sensing that Iran is being perceived differently. The first couple of weeks that I was in the States, the questions that my friends would ask me of where do you come from, or even people who tried to tell me where I'm coming from. That's
Yes.
that's even better. And so I think that was the catalyst for me to really study more about history, and not only modern history, but also going back and what does it mean to be Iranian? What is Iran, and where did this concept take shape? And I think that was always in the back of my head until in 2015, where I had like learned a little more and became curious, and I found myself, after college, had developed some artistic tools for myself to be able to express as a designer. Then I started thinking about how can I show this beauty of Iranian culture that we're familiar with. Of course, we know that there's ugliness, and that's probably true for every culture, but
Of course.
there's so much beauty that we know, that we have grown up, or we have parents that have grown up there, that we even like for a couple of visits, you could see that there are things that are done differently, and there's thousands of years of logic and um thinking behind something that is being done differently. I think there's those nuggets that I felt like maybe there's a part of my responsibility to show some of that, not only for myself, but also for people who feel similarly and don't have the tools. It was around that time that I think the catalyst, the spark, was I was looking at a list. I think that year there's a research center in the US called the Pew Research Center. And they do a lot of data and analytics. And they're very good at what they're doing. It's not, just your an average research center. What they had done was that they had ranked countries based on what is the most loved country in the world. They have conducted a survey um, like within, I think, 50 or more countries in the world. And there are 20,000 plus people that were asked questions, and this was the result. The top country, I think, was Germany that year, 2015. I think they had won the World Cup the year before, the Soccer
Ah,
World Cup, and I think that has some effect. There was a lot of European countries up there, and a lot of and some East Asian countries. Japan was there. I think South Korea was there. And On the other side of this list, they had also listed countries that are the most hated. And to my surprise, Iran was dead last.
mhm.
Um, I'm not going to talk about the other countries in the list, but some countries that you could guess why they would be there. But Iran being that, I knew that Iran is, not seen positively in the West. But mind you, like this was a survey done worldwide. It was not only Western countries, it's not only Western surveyors that were doing this. And I think that kind of stung. It was a little shocking for me to see that to be dead last was something moved in me. Like I knew, like if we were, bottom 20, I would have been hurt, but understood that. But dead last is just something else. So I think
Yeah.
that was the moment where I first of all the curiosity kicked in. Like why are we last, and is there a way to change that? Something I was thinking about in the thought process of that, I don't know if this particular you have faced some of this. I would like to hear you sort of externalize when did you find out about Iran being such a hated country. But for me, like I saw Germany there up there, and like 100 years ago, Germany must have been one of the worst seen countries in the world because of what happened in the World War One and Two. So to see Japan and Germany, two countries that were very hated, turn around and change their image was something for me. Like it felt like a case study. It felt personal, and I felt like I need to spend time to understand why this is. I would like to hear you, like, is that something that resonates with you? Like, this when you hear that, what goes through your head?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have, much like you, I was born in Tehran and I came here at a younger age, around 7. And I actually have very early memories of being in second and third grade and standing at the bus stop waiting for the school bus to come out in the street close to our home. And American kids saying things like, America beat Iran in the war, right? And I remember thinking, when were we even at war? I mean, I remember anti-American sentiment in Iran, and
Yeah.
those of us who were in Iran in the 80s and before certainly remember concepts like Magbat on Recall, of course. But as a kid, I never understood any of it, and that there was this proxy war, of course, between Iran and the U.S. In what is known as the Iran-Iraq War, where the U.S. funded and supported Iraq. And I would say the U.S. has a history of funding countries which later become their own enemies and become dictators like Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
But I did not understand this. I was 7, 8 years old, and other 7 and 8 year olds clearly they had heard it from their parents. Clearly they had gone home and they said, "Hey, there's a new kid in my class. I think he's from Iran, is probably, I assume, was what they said." And their parents said, "Oh, I imagine that the narrative was that their parents said, 'Oh, that country, well, we kicked their ass in the war,' or something like that."
Interesting. Yeah,
In a very American fashion. I did
totally.
not understand it. What's
Probably
that?
half of them didn't even realize that Iran and Iraq are two different countries. They might have thought
Yeah.
about the
Yeah, actually, you're right. I hadn't even thought of
yeah,
that. Because then, of course, after the U.S. fought its proxy war with Iran
exactly.
through Iraq, the U.S. then fought an actual war
Yeah,
with Iraq.
yeah,
Um, so hey, there's a very good chance they didn't even comprehend the difference, and we're thinking of the U.S.-Iraq war, Operation Desert Storm era. Yeah, but I did not understand that, and I remember also the kids again when I was 7, 8 years old. The kids in my class saying things like, "Well, you know, if you live here long enough, then you'll be considered American." And I didn't really understand that. So essentially, what I'm reading into it now as an adult is like your identity of who you are isn't good enough. We're going to transition you into a proper identity of being an American. You just have to put in the
assimilation
time,
for sure.
live here for 10 years, and you'll be American. I remember thinking to myself, "Oh, great. That's what I want to do because I want acceptance." And I remember thinking, "Okay, great. Yeah, just in 10 years, I'll be accepted. I'll be American or American enough." Um, which as an adult to me is very fascinating to think that this was kind of the perspective that I and other kids had at this very young age. And clearly it was given to us by the adults around us that an Iranian identity is not a worthy one and needs to be transitioned into that of an American identity, or at the very least half American, American Iranian, Iranian American. Um, yeah,
Absolutely. You know what you're saying is so true. For a lot of I didn't grow up here, so I didn't have those super early age. Like imagine kids that age thinking and talking about these things. And as you say, they're probably reflecting some of the things that their parents are saying.
yeah,
But what's interesting to me also is how we, like this Iranian culture and the worthiness of it, and we have to evaluate it, whether we call ourselves Iranian or not. It manifests itself into people calling themselves Persian and hiding
yes,
behind that word instead of, saying Iran. And I think a lot of the projects that we're doing now is trying to reclaim that. I don't know to what level of success. I remember a couple of days ago, somebody on Twitter, I announced the new book that's coming that we're doing on Iranian mythical creatures, and some guy said, "Dude, just name it Persian mythical creatures, and you your sales are gonna be like 10 times more." And that's, I don't know to take that as a joke or not, but there's some truth to that. And I
they're
and I
probably
think
right.
that is certain amount of that is sad that we have to hide behind certain terms not to be recognized as Iranians, because I'm not blaming for people. I'm not blaming people who do that, and I think that that's totally understandable, because of the bad image that the name Iran has. But if we don't claim it, it's going to continue that way.
Yeah, and I think we're in an era where people are reclaiming a lot of words. People of all cultures are trying to reclaim various words, and redefine them. So I think that makes sense. I historically have definitely referred to myself as Persian more often than Iranian. And I could even make a case like calling ourselves Persian is more referring to the history rather than the
Yeah,
current era of who we are and where we come from, or that ethnically we are Persian, whereas nationality wise we are Iranian. But at the same time, like, yeah, I think we should frankly use both in a positive way,
totally.
and have them
Absolutely.
associated with the history and the beauty of the culture. And as you said earlier, every culture has its ugly side. So we shouldn't have to change the name of who we are in order
Yeah,
to distance ourselves from the more difficult parts of our history and our cultures.
absolutely. And I think something that I would like to remind myself, and I put a lot of weight on in the works that I do, is that not the idea that the Iranian culture is some way better. Obviously there's a lot of faults with it. It's you know putting putting the onus on the fact that there, you know, like Iranian culture has beautiful things to offer to humanity. Like looking at it in a humanistic way of like, yes, there is faults with it, but there's also beauties that any culture could use. It just makes the experience of being human better. There are certain things that are certainly in that line that you know, as I'm doing this research and these and this projects with a lot of people who know a lot of things about certain aspects of the culture, comes up that these are really beautiful things that is really sad to, you know, push away. And I think the culture in Iran right now is also becoming very westernized in the sense that anything that is traditional is kicked to the curb. And I've seen, you know, the acceleration of that, but also I've seen, you know, the Gen Z or Dahe Hashtadi or Dahe Navadi kids claiming Iranian things. So I think the potential for both is there. I think we do as culture curators or cultural creators, as artists, whatever we want to call ourselves, people have somewhat of a platform, could sort of I don't want to say influence because that's a negative word, but like could inspire some of that, could inspire that we could be modern people, but also use some of the things that were beautiful in our tradition,
Yeah.
bring it in a meaningful way in the modern lifestyle. So,
Yeah, and I see, I mean, I don't want to represent other cultures, but like my impression of say Japan when I go to downtown Tokyo is it was incredibly modern, and yet there was so much of what I perceive to be either traditional Japanese culture or things that were hearkening to traditional Japanese culture. Like there was massive skyscrapers next to traditional temples. I'm told a lot of them are reproductions rather than being, you know, 1,000 years old or however old. But nonetheless, that juxtaposition of a massive skyscraper right next to a small traditional building, I thought was an incredible thing. And I think there are other cultures that are doing this. Obviously, some of it is wealth because you need the wealth to one, build
yes.
modernity, and two, preserve antiquity. Both take money, effort, technology, engineering. So that can be an inhibitor. Arguably, we're seeing some of this throughout the Middle East of, you know, a lot of modernity coming in. And one thing that is notable is where there's a lack of infrastructure, it's easier to build modernity. So if there's empty space, it's easier to build a skyscraper.
Uh,
Whereas if there's already a city there, 100-year-old city, you'd first have to demolish it in order to build modernity. You'd have to demolish the roads that are there in order to build new roads. Whereas if it's empty land or largely undeveloped, it's a lot easier to bring in
Ah,
modernity.
that's very interesting. Never thought about that for sure. Some of the smaller countries around the Persian Gulf with the wealth, and honestly, like good planning that they have done with their natural resources, they're able to move so much faster. And actually now
Yes.
at the point where they create culture, which is impressive. And again, has its own faults, and we all know that.
Yes.
Not always friendly relations. We don't want to get into that, but there is certainly beautiful things that are coming out of there, and they're doing certain things right. And it's always a point of contention of why Iran, with such a long history, is not able to show its own culture and show its own honor its own tradition in a modern in a modern way, in a modern life. So yeah, I think those are absolutely great points. Money is
Ex-
huge.
yeah.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. I
No, no, finish your thought, please.
um I was gonna start a new thought,
Please.
which is sort of relevant to what we are talking about. But I don't want to, you know, like sort of take the reins
If
here.
you have a thought, share it. Yeah.
Yeah, the thought I have, and if you're interested, we can talk about this, is that it's sort of going back to the money question, and going back to the idea that I shared earlier about the spark that happened in me in seeing that list. Why is South Korea high up in that list? Why is Japan so high up? Why did Germany get so high up? Um, why why do my parents in Iran, or a lot of people in Iran watch Korean TV shows? Why do they watch Turkish TV shows? Do we not have our own, like stories to tell? Yes, we do, obviously, but looking at the idea of how do you turn, and this gets back into, now I've found that there is an issue. How do we move into the direction that we could create a change? Largely, obviously, from the research I did, it comes down to, as you said, a big amount of money that you could, produce TV shows. Like let's take South Korea, for example, and how this country has made immense leaps in terms of culture and industry, and how they've changed their face in where they play in Earth, on the global scale. Korea started in the 90s. They started putting 1% of their GDP into cultural exportation. Imagine that amount of immense amount of money. Maybe it was not as big in the 90s as it is now, but that is directly correlated to how they're successful abroad with their culture. They started making TV shows, K-pop. You remember, like, K-pop was going crazy in the US for a while. I think
Yeah,
it's still there,
still
but
is.
like there was it was a sudden slap, as if, but no, these are all planned. Since the 90s, it's been 30 years that they're working on this, and they know that when they um, um, produce cultural work, then Korean food becomes more popular, because you'd see the TV shows, then you want to eat the food. When
Yeah.
you see the TV shows, you want to buy the Kia, you want to buy the LG, you want to buy, so these are all linked and related. So promoting your culture even brings that financial. It's like the chicken chicken and egg, so that they are correlated. Like culture could promote you financially in the world, and better money could promote your culture in this way. But they started that cycle in the 90s to a serious degree. You see the news about sports washing and what Saudi Arabia is doing.
Yes.
I bet you there's so much resistance to it in the US, but come down the line, the new generation that's growing up, if they're into golf, like I'm just giving a very, like, small example. The Persian Gulf, Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, like all of those Arabian Peninsula countries, like they are putting money into producing culture, showing their culture, showing the beauties of their culture. Turkey has started doing that regionally, and I've seen directly the effects of it politically online, on social media, on how they're watching these Turkish TV shows, Pakistanis, Iranians, and all of that, and now they're becoming fans of Turkey. It's immense. It might not be, you might not be affecting the intellectual layer of that society, but you're affecting the body of that country. And so let's I mean, thinking about those things, realizing that that's what the countries do to change their face, then looking at our Iranian government, obviously this is not possible. This is not possible for the current system. The money is not there, the attitude is not there. If Iranian government doesn't stop grassroots from producing culture, I think that is where the expectations. That's a positive thing. If anything, I think it's very against producing anything cultural that is connected to more of an Iranian identity than an Islamic or Shia identity. I don't want to put value into, like, what is better. I'm just saying that this is the reality that we're dealing with, and being Iranian in Iran is like being a second class. I don't want to victimize, but that's the situation that we have. So obviously, there's not going to be money coming in. What is our alternative? I think um, because we do not have this big, push of money into cultural production via government, there is sort of I look at it in a parallel way into software production. I was in a company working um, as a in a media company as a technologist, and was like faced with some of the theories that how software is developed and things like that, and looking at this company called Red Hat. They do open source software development. That really captured my imagination into, are we able to crowdsource cultural creation when there is this much talent in Iran, there's this much need, there's this much uh, desire to create and show our culture. Can we pull those together into strategic groupings where we are actually doing things direct in a good direction, a directional way? We're helping each other. We're developing things open source so that we can accelerate this cultural creation when we do not have the capital, let's say, like traditional one government gives money. So like spreading it around with tons of people getting to do things, sharing it with each other, and creating a platform, creating a sort of baseline of our culture so that we could easily step up and make more complex products or projects and things like that. So that's when the Eranshahr project was born, and that's the idea behind it of how we could do this. And with the specifically for me and Eranshahr specifically, I think this could be global, but for Eranshahr specifically, my thought is that these things need to be done for free and accessible for everyone. Certain parts of it that are attractive or meaningful, we could productize and sell, and this could be financed through the purchase of the products by Iranians in diaspora, which are in a better financial situation, who are willing to pay a premium to get the tools to show their neighbor who they are, to show their kids who are growing up here who they are would do. So that is sort of a long circle. Sorry, I did the whole thing. Long circle of where the Eranshahr project came around to be.
Outstanding. So to clarify, you mentioned working for a software company. So it was Red Hat that you worked for?
I did not work for it. I
Oh,
did want to work for
okay.
Red Hat. No, I worked for a media company that that took projects from a lot of large companies. I worked for through this company VML. I worked for Google for a while. I was an experience designer for them of their what is the experience of the user toward this physical product. At that time, the Pixel 5 was coming out. We were working on the experience around that. I worked for Ford for a while for their electric vehicle. So through this company, I was able to touch multiple brands like PepsiCo. I worked for Gatorade for a while. So it was these quote unquote professional experiences of these companies that are honestly the largest in the world, that how do they change the perception? A brand is a perception. How do they change people's perception about their brand? Learning those tools, and that is when I realized, what if I take these tools that I've learned for these big companies, treat Iranian culture as a brand, and apply
Yes.
that to that, so that we're maybe not last next year, maybe second to last, or
Progress.
progress is being made. So
Outstanding. Okay, so then yeah, let's talk about Eranshahr. And my observation when I look at the website, the word open use or open library is there. That seems to be very germane to the project. One of the cornerstones, perhaps, that you are, the summary of what I've interpreted is you are kind of preserving Iranian culture, digitizing some of it so that it can be disseminated on the internet with things like image files, for example, and then you're doing it open source. I imagine you probably have a lot of volunteer labor involved. You mentioned having a monetary model of consumers buying some of the products. which is outstanding. So hopefully some people are getting paid. I think we're all fans of people being able to earn a living, artists, researchers, programmers, graphic designers, etc. Everyone should get paid for their work. But I respect, if people are passionate and curious, as you've said, that I'm sure some people are doing it just for the sake of kind of preserving the culture. So tell us, yeah, a little bit about how did Eranshahr start? What was the first? Was there a first project in terms of where you started, and kind of what you hope to achieve in the beginning?
Absolutely. Yeah, I started with this theory of like applying these things, tools that I've learned into Iranian culture. It's very high level. It's almost philosophical. It's not as something that what do you do day to day? So I think the trick in 2021, I think January 2021, I left my work from that agency to put my full-time job, full-time work on this. I started it in 2020 in a serious manner, and I think by 2021 I was at a place where I thought I'd saved enough money to kind of embark on this journey. Um, so everything started with a phone call with a couple of friends. I called them and I said, "Hey, I have this idea. I have the tools. Here's the theory." I showed them a whole deck like we did in the agencies. I sold them on this idea, and they were very they felt it the same way I had, and I realized that this might be dare, or like the issue in mind for a lot of people, and so we, me and a couple of my childhood friends, started a couple of projects. We thought about what can we do. In retrospect, looking back, we didn't pick the most strategic things, but I think it was those mistakes that we made that made us, find out what is the better way to do things. And we started a game. We spent about 5,000 hours on that collectively. It was a ton of work. It was really nice. We thought one of our team members was very, very good at making games. So we gathered a team, a small team, met every day, worked on this game. It's called um, Silk Caravan, like something between a silk and like a combination of that. With the idea of, the Silk Road and things like that. So you do trade, there's no war in it. It's a multiplayer game. I don't believe it's on, every once in a while you have to update, things on it, for it to be on iOS and Android marketplaces. So it's not on right now, but yeah, it was good. We learned a lot of things. We spent a lot of time on not a lot of return. And this was done for, it was a free game. We were hoping to put ads on it, but our team kind of dissolved before that happened. I'm kind of giving you some of the examples of things that didn't happen that we learned from. We started a podcast, never made it, never made the first episode. We worked a lot on the first episode, but never released it. Um, we it just the felt I felt like the quality wasn't there. I think it was around that time where I realized this is all in 2020 when I was still working. I think it was at this point where I realized that if we want to do something like this, we have to gather more people. We have to do things that are fundamental, and giving access to those to other people. It's not only one group. If this thing needs to be wants to be successful, it needs to be something open source, something fundamental that everybody could use. It's the um, um, like raw material to make culture. I think giving access to the raw material of the culture then became our priority. So I started a project where I illustrated kings from the coins. I realized that nobody had ever done that. I was thinking, like, why are there so many YouTube videos about some Roman emperor and what he did day to day? but there is none on Iranian emperors. And I think that's when I realized that because they're not visualized in a way that's meaningful. So that's what I took on. This was personal. For me. So I visualized the kings like I think I ended up doing like about 130 over a year span, individuals, historical figures that were not visualized before, but the visual evidence was there. Albeit the visual evidence was a little hard to get at certain points. Like you had to get into. That's why I started with the easy ones. Started started posting every day. More people gathered, more people were knew about history, taught me, showed me new things, and that's how I was able to sort of grow in this way, and I became really interested in certain segments of our Iranian history with this project. And I think that was when the project took over the year and a half, um, gathered a lot of attention. And that's where I was able to use that platform then to activate some of the other suggestions that were made. There was a group of people who separately reached out to me and said, what are you going to do about mythical creatures? You're doing historical figures. What are you going to do about mythical creatures? I was like, I don't know. If you want, let's meet up and talk about this. So we did that. A team got formed, a volunteer team, of course, got formed, and we started gathering the stories from every single village. People would send us these stories. At the beginning, we started this project thinking like maybe there's 12 of them, 12 mythical creatures we know of Iran, because we had done some Googling. Maybe we could get it to 20 if we like dive deep. Turns out that it's never ending. It's unbelievable. Like we started doing a couple of things that are more known that gathered enough attention that, certain people sent their local lores to us. Like, oh, in the village of so and so, we have this jinn that we talk about that does this really funny thing. And then so we put that on. It was unbelievable. People were like, whoa, this is awesome. My grandma used to talk about this. And then some other guy from some other village says, oh, we have a better one. Ours is this one. So it became like a sort of like a tribal positive, in a positive way, a competitive sense. So this project just completely exploded into, we got access to stories that probably are written for the first time ever.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's when that was really when I realized that this thing could be huge. And from that, we and like we didn't have a financial model. We hadn't agreed on, it was just people doing volunteer work, and they knew they were doing volunteer work. But when things got a little more serious, then we realized if we want this to keep living, um, it needs to have some sort of a financial. I know this talk of finances are so ugly in Iranian culture, especially because a lot of the guys and girls, women that are helping us with this project are from Iran. Other than this being culturally weird, I think there is because Eranshahr is an American entity now that have it's LLC in Missouri. um, it cannot do financial work with any individual in Iran, and that makes it a lot harder. There's numerous challenges, and I think that sort of is part of the reason why this area is so like nobody is creating culture. Like Hamid Rahmanian is a hero for me. Like personally, I saw his work in 2015 around the time where I was thinking, why is nobody doing anything good about Iran culture? I found
Yes.
um, Hamid Rahmanian. His work is amazing, inspiring for me. And my wife, as I mentioned, is American, and she together we read that. It was my first time actually reading through Shahnameh. Funnily enough, it was through an English version because Hamid's work is the book is in English. And so I think seeing those examples made me realize that there is ways to do this. And I think I really, admire Hamid's work. And I think that that showed me the way that this is possible. This is possible for somebody to do this. And was very encouraged. We going back to the financial, I just want to clarify this. When we define a product, um, out of the work, we're trying to show the example of this is the these, like if somebody is trying to do a novel about Iranian creatures, now there's this big amount of data that is accessible online on Iranshahr.com that you could find, that you could write about your fictional characters, your novels, if you want to do an animation, if you want to do whatever. We're trying to create those, raw materials that are accessible. We're trying to model it also that these could be made into more complex products. Some of our friends here in Canada, a team member that was in Iran now is in Canada, so financial, back and forth would be easier with her. Came up with a game. We used some of the visuals that we had done for that project with the permissions and all of that, um, and started making a product, a card game out of that. So to be honest, financially, I still don't know what is going to happen. The theory is there, but there's challenges. But this year is the year that I feel like this thing is viable financially, and there's legal things to be dealt with. But I think the Iranian American community has really, really um, uh, been positive on this first product that we have had that has encouraged us to come up with more products and keep this going and growing it.
Excellent. Yeah, a couple of quick clarifications for anyone listening. So, hopefully I represent it correctly, but my understanding is that U.S. law embargoes anyone in the U.S. from doing business or having finances tied to anyone in Iran. You can't buy Iranian products or import Iranian products, or I assume you can't, bank in Iran and things like that. I don't know the
Absolutely.
law, to its fullest
Yeah.
extent, but essentially the U.S. and Iran don't do business. I have seen roundabout occasionally a product ends up somewhere in the US. Someone, it maybe brings it through the Emirates or Jordan or something like that. Technically, you're not supposed to, but occasionally happens. And funny story, I think I was at a Kroger grocery store, like QFC Fred Meyer, and they actually had Iranian blue salt. It had to have been a mistake, like a shipping error. I bought it, and I should have just bought the whole thing, because I've never seen it on store shelves
Oh God, I
ever.
don't
And
even know
it,
what that is. Do we have blue salt in Iran?
shoot, I should find someone who's an expert and do an interview. So there is a mountain or a mound of salt somewhere in Iran, I forget where, and it is under such heavy, so it's underground, and the ground that is above the salt is so dense and heavy that it actually packs that salt itself down more dense than more or less any other salt in the world. And because the salt is denser than others, its structure ref, refracts light differently than other salts, and it gives the illusion of being blue. There is no blue color in the salt.
Whoa.
It essentially has a prismatic effect where it splits light and makes the salt crystals itself look blue. So
That
there's
is
this
awesome.
Iranian blue salt. I don't think you can get. I don't think there's blue salt anywhere else in the world. I could be wrong, or maybe there's just not a significant amount of it. Um, but yeah, and because it's denser, it essentially has a more salty flavor. It packs more flavor per crystal because the crystals themselves are denser. But yeah, it's not a product you're supposed to have in the US. You can't find it in the US. And I just ran into it like a
That's
decade ago.
incredible. They found
Yeah,
a way to bring it in.
it had to have been a shipping error. They put it in the wrong box on the wrong boat,
Oh my
and
gosh.
the
Labeled
person at
as
the
Turkish salt and
probably,
butter. That's
yeah.
the classic. Yeah, this, it is hurtful, but like it hurts me. But that's part of the reason why we don't have our products in Iran. And it's crazy because there's a lot of, I bet it would sell really good in Iran, but we don't have the ability to do that. And yeah, that's a part of, that's a part of the difficulty, and a part of the reason why nobody's stepping in doing this type of work. But as I said before, I think like from the beginning, I knew that anything that we do, and the work that is produced is open to anyone, any person, any company who wants to use these and produce products, they're welcome to, whether they're in Iran, whether they're not, as long as we're not having financial ties with them in Iran, they're fine. Like we want Iranians to take this, and I've seen Iranians taking these images, like they're producing stuff. There's a lot of production that's happening through these open source projects that we've done, and I've seen other open source projects pop up. So I think it's the correct time to do this. I think we need to take the reins of culture creation for ourselves. We can't wait for somebody. I see this on social
Yes.
media all the time. We have the best stories. Why is the government not making serial like, I don't
Yes.
know, about Sasani or something? Like, because why are you even asking? Obviously, they're not going to do it. It's us. Nobody in the US, I mean, I'm not fool enough to compare the societies. But like, imagine somebody in the US says, "Oh, we don't have. Why is the government not making a TV show about so and so civil wars?" Like, what? The government is. What's the government doing here? It's people who band together and find a financial model, and that's something that I'm looking forward to, for to have competitors maybe, and see how they're dealing with this financially, because that's one of the biggest question marks that we have, and how do we deal with people in Iran? How do we the people who want to help in projects, in products, how do we reimburse them? I think that's a big one that we haven't figured out, and that's why we can't use a lot of things that are directly linked to some artists in Iran. Obviously, the projects that we're doing are the things that we're putting up are open source. Anybody can use them, but there are certain things like, somebody made an image of something, like I can't just take that and productize it, and um, I have to have permission and things like that. So it's a little different than software creation, because there is very clear ways that you could deal with that in software creation, open source, but we don't have a good model in culture creation. I think we're experiencing like philosophical issues and financial and thing, like, yeah, of how do we deal with these things, and I think that's a good challenge.
Yeah. And so you mentioned this library of imagery. So looking at your website, this is called Nardoon. I
Yeah,
see it's an open library of Iranian Persianate visual elements. I've looked through it. This is I love every project you've done. I've looked through your website multiple times over the last few years. This was one that struck me. They've all really grabbed me, but this is incredible because anyone, myself or anybody else, either for fun or for an actual project, can go on and just download, what is it, hundreds, if not
it's
thousands,
600 something currently,
different
but
images.
yeah, it could get you a lot of places, because there's like,
Yeah.
it's categorized and things like that. I've actually, now you brought that up, I've lost the SSL on that website. I have to redo it, so it might give you a warning that this site is not secure or something. Yeah, we have to fix that.
Ah, yes,
Um,
it does say that. Yep. Okay. Good
yeah,
to know.
oops.
This site is safe as far as I know. I've
The
been
site is
there.
safe. Yeah,
I
well,
I
I'll fix that.
endorse, but I will not be held liable if
Yeah,
anyone.
no, this happened last week. I had forgotten to pay
Uh,
for it,
yeah.
which comes back to, yeah, this stuff costs stuff. It has
Yes.
running costs, but I think we'll be able to grow and make better products. Um, one thing about that is that, we talked about Hamid Rahmanian. Hamid used, this is inspired by Hamid, really. I wanted to name this library. I'm going to tell you a story. Um, Hamid, what he did was that he took the scans and high quality images of old Shahnames, like the Persian epic of Persian kings, called the Shahnameh. He took the old ones like from 1500s, some Ottoman images, some Mughal images, and he did a digital collage. He took pieces out of it, cleaned them up, and put this into like this unbelievably beautiful book, which he has done, which we talked about earlier. Um, and what he did was that he said himself in a video that he trapped himself in a room or something for 3 years, made this library with thousands of pieces of Iranian Persianate, forms like a flower, a little rock here, a little tree there, and then he brought all of them together. So what we wanted to do is that instead of one person trapping themselves for 3 years in a room, what we did is that we asked for volunteers. 30 people said, like I interviewed 30 people. Eventually we had 10 serious people. For 1 month, over the course of every night, we met together, did this. So eventually, I think we had 300 collective hours or something like that. Yeah, 30 days, 10 people, 1 hour a day. So 300 collective hours, and we were able to extract 600 out of open, and the images were all open source. Like there were open libraries from Library of Congress, um, you know, um, uh, Christie's, a bunch of things that were clearly mentioned that these are open source to use. And so we extracted them, we put them on a platform so everybody can use them. So it's sort of like, it's bringing, it's this mentality of making it open source. So like for people who did it, it was just 1 hour for a month, and they loved it. I loved it. I did it myself. Like we did it together. But then imagine what the benefit is. Like it saves tens of thousands of hours from artists to be able to easily use this. I asked professors to use this in their presentations, like it's super simple to use. So these are the type of projects that we want to do more of. A very
That's
quick,
beautiful.
very easy, and yeah, it big benefit.
Yeah. And I brought along, let's see, just some quick visual aids, I suppose, for anyone who might watch this or listen to this who's less familiar. So here is an American English version of the Shahnameh for anyone who's not familiar with it and doesn't read Farsi Persian. You can absolutely get the very big Shahnameh in English and learn
This
about
is
it.
this is all of it, right? Like every detail.
I believe so, given how thick it is. Yeah, and of
Love it.
course, here's a great example of kind of the the art, the Shahnameh style art, the miniature style art. And I also, as a kid, so I'm a well-known philatelist. As a kid, I have many stamp collections that I had from a kid. So
Oh,
here is
sweet.
this is from the International Ferdowsi Library. Let's see if
Oh,
I can get the
wow.
camera to, yeah, it
These are
says
beautiful.
Ferdowsi International Congress. They created these stamps, and here is the world's first dab. It was clearly dabbing was invented by Iranians, apparently. Um,
I love this. Man.
first recorded instance of dabbing long before it became an Instagram or TikTok trend.
Oh, I love this
And
so
then, of
much.
course, you mentioned Hamid's work. It is beautiful. And I'm going to certainly reach out to Hamid and see if we can discuss with him these Shahnameh Ferdowsi
Yeah.
inspired
Wow.
pop-ups that I
Masterpiece.
think again are can be such a fun and accessible way to engage with Persian culture with beautiful original art. Again, clearly inspired by that similar style that you've been using and you've been preserving in not
Totally. Just to be
only
clear, I was inspired by his work. He's not
right.
inspired by mine.
They're both inspired by the originals, the original
Totally.
miniatures
Totally. Totally.
of antiquity. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yashar, do you have his Shahnameh, like the illustrated book?
No, I just have that's the only book of Hamid's I have is the
Yeah.
Rostam pop-up.
Those them
Yeah, I know
nice.
he
I
has a
don't
lot.
have
I wish I had them all.
Yeah. I don't have the pop-up, but he has one that's the first. I think it's his first product in this line of Iranian
Yeah.
culture stuff. Um, it's I think probably half of the Shahnameh, only like the mythical and legendary parts, visualized in an amazing. It's not pop up. It's like
Right.
a illustrated book, but
Yeah.
that
I've
just
seen it
blew my
online.
mind. Yeah,
It's
for sure.
gorgeous. Yeah, it's certainly something I would like to have. It's
Yeah.
the imagery is beautiful and kind of tangential, but along the lines of Persian epics and making it accessible. One of the first books I bought when I was really starting to explore these Persian epics more. So there's a kind of lesser known but still famous The Conference of the Birds. That is another Persian epic. But so that's not quite as thick as the Shahnameh, but there is this version that is a visual one. And I wouldn't call it a children's book, but I think it can be absolutely great for kids. And really, the reason I bought this is it's the storytelling is actually very short. It's just these one sentences, but the images are gorgeous.
Oh my gosh, unbelievable. What is this called?
This is the Conference of the Birds, and it's Peter Sis or Size.
Peter
I'm not sure how to
Sis.
say that one. When I was looking for the actual, novelized Conference of the Birds, this was the first one I saw at the University of Washington Library years ago, and I flipped through it and I just thought, oh wow, these images are gorgeous. So I had to have it. Here's one of my favorite ones. Like, just look at that. Here's the Conference of the Birds. And I thought, yeah,
Wow, cool. This is awesome.
yeah, I really enjoyed that. Um, and then so let's
You
look.
got more stamps? Those were
I have
unbelievable.
I have so many stamps. Yeah.
Where did you find where did you get these stamps? It said
Um,
something about Congress or some
yeah, I
conference.
mean, I got these in the 80s when I was a kid, either my parents or maybe some family
Brought them
gifted them
over.
to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were
Oh man.
I have a
Oof.
lot of different stamp collections. This is one of the more traditional ones. Um, let's see. Yeah, this one was just like a small booklet with several pages of stamps that
Wow.
either my parents or
Yeah, that's
maybe
that
somebody
hawk right
gave me.
there in the being held. Oh my gosh, these are all Shawnum and stuff. This is
Yeah.
beautiful. Beautiful.
Yep. I probably have some others that I haven't had a chance to go through, but they're totally just I would
What
say
a
a prized possession from my childhood and even
what a
adulthood.
cool way to preserve nice that's I would love to see your collection. Like you do other like other cultures and like other stamps as well, obviously, right?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I started stamp collecting. I think an uncle of mine maybe gifted me his stamp collection. He also gifted me his coin collection from when he
Yeah.
traveled through Europe, and I still have both and have added to them. This is the most, I guess, kind of artistic or unique one. Some of them are circulated stamps. I mean, as a kid, we would living in Iran, if our family sent us letters from the U.S. or wherever, we would take the stamps off the envelopes and put them into our stamp books. So I have
Yeah.
I don't know, three or four probably stamp books full of and some envelopes just chock full of stamps that I just collected as a kid that I probably should go through and see if there's anything really
Absolutely.
outstanding. And
I've got
coins.
some hanging around. I'll send it over to you.
Yeah. Yeah,
We're
send me
just
pictures.
collecting dust here. Yeah. I'll
oh,
send you
oh, you mean
pictures if
send
you
me
Yeah, the actual ones, like I don't. I'll
would
send
love
you
it.
pictures if you're interested. I don't. They're
I'm
not as pretty as the ones that you have, but you know it might fit in the
That's all
collection.
right. Yeah, I like, just an eclectic assortment. Yeah, if you if you feel like sending me the
Yeah,
actual stamps, I would keep
absolutely,
them. I
for
have, yeah, so
sure.
many cool things like that that I've just kept, and
I love
sometimes
that.
I'll figure out a way to put them out for display in the home.
You
Um
mentioned coins. Have you, man, like doing these visual portraits of these kings? I had to obviously deal with a lot of coins because that's some of the primary sources that we have onto what these king might have looked like, and Um, a lot of them are from the period of let's say 300 BC, like further back, but
yeah.
that's where I was like specialized. Two something third century basically, third century BC to seventh AD, and just dealing with those. Once you get into it, then you'd like to see more, and you like to collect some. I've never bought any. I've stopped myself from doing that. Some ethical weirdness, and also like I just you know didn't want to get into the habit of purchasing things that are super expensive. But have you like ever looked at the classical like coins, or is that you mostly modern coins collection?
The coins I have are more modern, probably,
Yeah.
60s and newer from Iran. Certainly from the 80s, from when I was in Iran. But I have seen some like of
Yeah.
those 300 BC Achaemenid era
Oh, for
Persian
sure.
coins at auction. They were too expensive. You better believe
Yeah,
I
they're
wanted to buy
unbelievable.
them.
It's a whole industry.
Yeah,
But
with pictures
mm.
of, I don't know, Dariush, Xerxes, Cyrus type heads on them. They
Exactly.
were they were definitely cool. I would love to have a collection of them, but I don't.
Yeah, that's a whole addiction there. If you
Yeah.
can steer away, that'd be great. So,
Yep.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when we're talking about visuals, so yeah, so it looks like you took this concept from Nardoon, the collection of images that again anybody can download and use for their own projects, and you then turn them into this card game, the Iranian Mythical Beasts
Hmm.
card game, which tell me if
Oh,
I'm wrong.
it got to you right on
Yeah,
time.
it did. It did.
These
And
are
I'm so
these
glad.
are yeah, these are not collected from Nardoon. These are custom made
Oh, okay.
illustrations. Yeah.
Good to know. I see. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think these again are gorgeous, and I love this like gold gilt, very very Persian,
There,
gold edges. That was something that
nouveau
really
riche.
struck me when I opened the box. I was like, oh, shiny
There you
gold Persian.
go. Black and
Um,
gold.
but
That's what's
yeah,
up.
these are gorgeous.
Thank you.
And tell me if I'm wrong, but it looks like it's
Mhm.
kind of styled in the style of something like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon the card
Oh,
game.
interesting.
Um, or
Yeah, that comes up. That comes up. I've not, believe it or not, Magic the Gathering is something that I've heard very recently, post building this game. And the person who actually designed the game definitely might know about this. Not visually, I mean like decided what is the game experience or the rules. But we play tested it digitally and things like that. The numbers for sure. There's this thing called, I don't know if I'm going to be liable for this or not, but like um there's this thing called the trump cards. You trump another card. Like you have a card that's like, in the theme of motorcycles, and your motorcycle is like has a bigger engine, or you're doing like there's like tons of different themes for these trump cards. And so part of it, now this is where I'm getting out of the liability. Part of that was inspired by those trump cards, and obviously part of it is any suit matching game like Uno or 1,000 other games that are suit matching. So it's a mix of both. um we really wanted to do something with Pokemon with the Shahnameh cards. I don't know if you have those or not, but um um, but we ended up doing a educational twist. Like they have stats, but it is you can't play a game with them. We're trying to rethink that here soon, but yeah, this is new. This is a new area for us, and because I think most of our energy has always been into creating these raw materials for everybody to be able to use. So the creation of these products is a little bit newer for us,
so
but we want to make
yeah,
sure.
it
Yeah.
occurs to me that when I was looking at the games page on your website, I didn't realize that the Shahnameh cards, the Persian Book of Kings
Yeah, yeah.
character collector's pack, I was thinking that that collector's pack actually can be a supplemental pack for the Iranian mythical
Oh, that's
creatures
not
game.
good.
So, okay, it's
We have
good
to
that I know
clarify
now.
that. No. Yeah,
And I
it's
and yeah,
yeah,
I
these are
saw
the
visually
cards.
they're very different from the
Yeah,
mythical
they're very
creatures cards.
different. And
Yeah,
they on the back they have I think these are good for educational purposes for
great.
kids. Because they
Yeah, and
clearly,
for comparison,
show, yeah. So
very different.
like on the back on those, there's nothing there because you have to be,
Yeah,
nobody can tell what card you have on your hand. But these are not like that. These are
I see.
they talk about, certain stats they have, where do they come from, a little description in Persian and English. We want to do all of that for all of our products. We want to do both Persian and English, both for kids who, their parents want them to kind of get in touch with the Iranian
Yeah.
culture if they're going to Sunday school for. Persian, I've heard some Iranian diaspora families very much like their kids to know better Persian, and I think that these are one of the few tools out there for that, and we want to expand that.
I really appreciate that, and I think it makes it so much more accessible. Because obviously a lot of Iranian Americans, first generation and third culture Iranians, can't just go and buy a Persian edition of the Shahnameh and read it. So having this stuff available in both Persian and English, I think makes it so much more accessible to the diaspora, and I really appreciate that. And to modernize it, to make it, to put it into a context like a card game, because people are familiar with these kinds of card games again,
Exactly.
like Magic the Gathering, which has become repopularized. I can't remember if it came out when I was in 5th grade, but that's the first time I
Mm,
heard of it. Back in, what is that, 1995-ish, people were playing Magic the Gathering and Pogs, and it was popular, but then sounds like it has become popular again. And I remember
again,
hearing
right?
about record setting sales of Magic the Gathering cards and
Well,
Pokemon cards for, I don't know,
that's
thousands,
amazing
maybe millions of dollars. I don't know how much they go
for
for, some of
sure.
them, but clearly this is a popular concept. So again,
Yeah.
putting it into this context that people are familiar with and can interact with, interface with, and to do it together in a card game where we can play each other. And yeah, you mentioned that it's a suit game. It kind of reminded me of Hook, the
Uh-huh.
Persian game that, I don't know, it's like is it like gin, or is it like rummy? There's a Western game that is similar
Oh,
to Hook.
interesting. You know, now that you mention this, I saw a comment on the ad video that I put out. Somebody was saying that, and they were talking about rummy or something. I couldn't tell if they're saying roomy or what are they saying.
Right? Yeah,
So
yeah.
now that you mention it, okay, this is ringing a bell. So this is similar to something like that.
Yeah. Or
Hmm,
maybe Bridge. It's been a long time since I played any of them, and I
interesting.
never played any of them much. And I feel like there's some crossover with some. But I think, yeah, there's like suits. You have to follow suits. Certain
Yeah,
cards can change the suits,
exactly.
and there's trump cards of sorts. I think in many of those games that I mentioned, if not maybe even all of them.
Oh wow,
Um,
interesting. Yeah,
and I think they're all really fun games with strategy
simple. Yeah.
and also some of them are team games where you kind of have to read each other's cues,
Mm,
which I think makes the games really interesting. Just like in Hook, try to read your teammate's strategy without actually being able to overtly discuss it. So I think these kinds of games can, yeah, just really.
isn't Hook the one that you play either two player or four player?
Yeah, I've typically played it with four. I can't remember if you do
If
two,
two, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. You
but
know, that's a very similar game to Hokm
that's what I
in
mean. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
Hook.
yeah.
Yeah.
And oh, get this, there is
Mhm.
a our next product
Yes, tell us about
is
the next.
going to be a so I looking around history and games that were we want to recreate a couple of these ancient games that were played. One of them, although not ancient, during the Safavid era, there was these cards called Ganjifa or Ganjafe. And oh my gosh, beautiful, beautiful set of that. It has 8 suits instead of 4, and it has 90 something cards. Um, and it was played like Hokum is played today, but you could go up to 8 people to
Hmm.
play that. And apparently, at the court they played that a lot and things like that. And at a certain point, um, it became illegal to do that because Islamic law during Safa was very strict. And so the production, basically, this game lives lives through this migration of this game going to India and them making it their own, putting like Indian Hindu gods in it. And then now we kind of know about this game through India because they never banned it or it was still there. But
Wow.
it's they call it Ganjifa. So what I'm trying to do is try to revive that. I think that would be really cool. I think I saw somewhere that was the predecessor to the French set of card games. I don't know if I believe that, but I think it would make a really good marketing claim.
Yeah. Great. Well,
So
I'm excited to
yeah,
see that. And I
that's
saw you also have on the website a book that is
mm-hmm.
Is it a book? It says stories, 1,001 mythical creatures. Is that a book or is it
Yeah,
a
it
product?
is. It is a
Okay,
book. It's a book coming out. It is. It's very close. It's very close to being done. I'm talking to a company in China
great.
to get it finalized. And it's it's like the same set of cards that you have, explaining these creatures. Like
That's
every
great.
single creature that is in here is explained. Plus, there's 81. There's 52 cards in here, so 52 creatures. But in the book, there's 81. There's more than just this. But we made sure that every single one that's in here, so kind of like you could buy it as a pack,
That's
and
great.
have it. Yeah, and
So
obviously that one also has like gold gilted around, and
it has to, yeah. It's the
it
law.
has it got it.
And it feels like that book can kind of supplement or enhance your enjoyment of the card game, right? To learn more
Absolutely.
about those
Yeah.
creatures.
Oh,
It
yeah.
reminds me of so did you ever are you familiar with Pokemon in general? You ever watch the
To
cartoon?
some degree, and now I'm showing that I didn't grow up here because I didn't know about the Magic the Gathering or Pokemon as much. We watched something similar called Digimon in Iran
Oh,
for
I
a little
watched
while,
Digimon. Yeah,
but
the
it
first one.
doesn't. So yeah,
That
tell me about Pokemon.
Digimon. We should do a whole show of watching Digimon in Iran because that was such a
So
good show.
you watched Digimon in Iran? You
I
remember that?
did.
That's
No, I
crazy.
didn't watch it in Iran. I watched it in the US.
Oh, okay, okay,
When I was
yeah.
in Iran, I watched like Pink Panther.
Oh
It was
yeah,
in the
yeah.
80s. Yeah.
Do you
Um,
mind me asking when were you born?
84.
84. Okay, okay. So we're very similar in age. Yeah. I was born in 89. Very, very
Uh-huh.
close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So in Pokemon, tell me if you've heard of this. There is this thing called a Pokédex. Do you know what that is?
No, that you get it, make a deck to attack someone or something?
It's it's a directory. It's a PDA. It's kind of
Oh.
like your 1,001 mythical creatures, except it's a
Oh,
digital
wow.
device, a handheld digital device that has the profiles of all the Pokemon. So if you watch the cartoon, the main character Ash, he's trying to capture the Pokemon. He encounters a new one. He opens his Pokédex, and I assume it has like a camera or a sensor. It sees what Pokemon is in front of him, and it says, "Ah, this Pokemon, it's Charizard," and it gives you the profile on Charizard. It's a
This is
plain
something fictional in the cartoon, or they actually made a physical thing out of it?
both. It's a fictional thing in the
Oh,
cartoon, and then they made
I
a
love
toy.
it.
I don't know if you have seen this brand in the 90s called Tiger. They would make these handheld games. Others might have made it too. And they existed post 90s because Pokemon, some of these products came out probably early 2000s.
Yeah,
I think circa 2005, Nintendo Pokemon licensed Tiger to make an actual handheld toy. And it's, by comparison to today's technology, it's very rudimentary because obviously you could download a concept like this as an app and have it be
totally.
very
Totally.
robust now on a smartphone. But
Yeah.
this is pre-smartphone.
That
And
sounds awesome. I bet
it's a
you
black
guys
and white
went
LED screen.
crazy for
Yeah.
this. Man,
It's a cool
I
concept.
gotta check this out.
But yeah, I feel like
Maybe
you've
we would
created a
do
Pokédex.
maybe we could do a digital Pokédex.
Yeah.
It's called DECK.
DEX, I believe.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't know if they took that from I don't know which came first, but the Yellow Pages, the US phone book eventually
Yeah.
changed its name to Dex, DEX, which I think was a
Really?
mashup of Directory Expert.
Ah,
If I remember the ads from the 90s, but I don't know if Pokemon
interesting.
stole that name or at least maybe they translated it. Maybe it was
Yeah.
something else in Japanese, but Pokédex.
I love it. This is really cool. This is really cool. Yeah. So this is the Iranian mythical creatures decks.
Yeah,
It says very long.
exactly. I love that. When I saw that, I was like, oh, they have a Pokédex.
Yeah, for sure. It's coming out. It took a very long time. Oh wow. Making a book is not. We were hoping that we would get all of we have about 400 entries in our directory from mythical creatures that were written, and some local lores that so and so's mom said, and we put it up online, and to gather whether this is real or not. This guy made it up, or actual some other people recognize that. And so there's a lot of entries. We were hoping to make something that you could reference, scientifically, like,
Mhm.
a legit, series of books that are categorized. But we realized that's going to take a lot of time. So what we did is that we decided let's do something for teenagers, you know, like not super scientific, like we don't have to reference the exact page number of everything. We say where these stories are coming from in their own sentences. Like this is coming from the ancient book of Bondahesh, and this is coming from Shahnameh, things like that. Or this is coming from like some oral source from so and so village in so and so province. But yeah, even this was a way more work. Like we were originally hoping they would get it ready before January so people buy it as AD for January. I don't know if people do that for Christmas. Um and we didn't get to that. So we said definitely for Eid al-Nowruz, didn't get there. Now it's what, May 19th and it's still not in production, but it's very close. So yeah, it took a while.
Okay. Um, Something I was going to ask you about is, have you seen, do you know if anybody has any other projects in the works using some of this open source work that you have, like Nardoon? Have you seen, has anybody reached out to you and said, "Oh, I'm gonna build this other thing using this imagery or other open source libraries"?
What comes to my mind immediately, like with the images, they need to ask permission to use the images. The stories are open for everybody to use. There has been a couple of books publishing around without permission that they have these images. Obviously, we knew that's going to happen, and I'm actually putting aside like that the rights of the people who did the illustrations are like that's a murky thing.
Sure.
I'm glad somebody's doing something because I'm glad that these are being revived. It's
Yeah.
just hard to show that you're supposed to ask permission. But in what when you ask that question to me, like the thing that immediately jumped up to my head into my head is that a lot of YouTube videos. Some asked permission, some asked, some didn't. And I had said there, you don't need to, if it's my personal, like the Kings, you could reference it, but you don't have to ask my permission. Just use it. Use it because you're doing a story for Iranian figures.
Yeah.
There's a couple like there's a British creator on YouTube that has, you know, for some reason taken interest in Iranian figures and has used that. And there's tons of Iranian video podcasts that are using that. There's some that are doing there was a group called Karzarname, which for some reason they disbanded, but they were doing some really cool work. They were only documenting the wars, but with game engines that they were doing, like, you know, like how Total War, it's a sort of game engines they were using that re-skinned them and to make, you know, to make it look like it was cool. So they have used it. There's a couple of other content creators that have used this King, specifically King projects. For the mythical ones, there's a lot of Instagram channels that are making animation stories that are referencing these. Some are not referencing them. Some are using the pictures. Some are doing their own AI generated pictures. So it's a mix. Some do it, some don't do it. We're not going after everybody. If they're doing it, I think that's something is working. That's what it means.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. It's kind of complex. It's great to see it out there for sure,
Yeah,
but obviously IP is it's yeah, something to be protected, no doubt, in the work that
exactly.
you all put in here.
Exactly. With visuals, that's the case with visual. Nardun, no. Nardun is absolutely open.
Great.
Like you use
Wonderful.
it, you don't even have to mention it, anything. But the stories that we have on the directory, you could use it. Obviously, don't copy the whole thing. You could, like, you know, change it or whatever, make it
Yeah.
yours. But yeah, I mean, we have referenced where you could find. I think that's the important thing. Like you go and find the actual thing
Aha.
in this old, ancient text or old text that you could find it, and then use those to, you know, like make a compelling point if you're doing it for
Great.
real creatures.
That
Yeah.
feels like an incredible resource you provided. The work you did and the references to the originals for people to
Totally.
make
Yeah.
their own.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I saw on your website you can sign up to be involved. And it
Hmm.
has some parameters. Are you still looking for signups? Is there anything you want to say in terms of
Man.
want?
Okay, so once in a while we have a project that we request that if people are interested, for some through some miracle, we're in a position where there's a lot of people who say that they're interested. Usually when we put up a story, hundreds of people say they're interested. Um, uh, but we have gotten better about making absolutely sure we're clear up front of what we need. Like we need you to have an hour nightly every night, for a certain, I mean, it depends on the project, but usually if you're serious, like you could spend an hour a night in a meeting or something,
Yeah.
for a period of like 1 month or 2 weeks or whatever the project length is. So we've gotten better at that, but still getting a lot of things coming through. Um, we contact them, we talk to them. If their vibe is right, then we attract them. A lot of the time, let's say 30 people start and it ends up being 15 and it's volunteer work. We're really grateful for people even like sending messages to us to say they're interested, even if they don't respond when we come back with like, here's the things that we were trying to do. But yeah, through those 15, let's say that stay, 5 are really active and stay and keep on doing other projects with us. Some stay and become, like really influential in the projects. Like they introduce a project themselves and they're very active, and they introduce a product and they, so it's this way. It's like through this we get people and work with them, and if they're interested and they're right for the group and they're enthusiastic, and um yeah, if the vibe is right there, then they do whatever. It's open, like they could propose whatever. If somebody come, yeah, we've had messages through the thing that you're mentioning, people proposing things, and we've talked and said, if you're looking for motifs, Iranian motifs, and there's no directory to get that, maybe somebody wrote an article about it in Iran and it's in this, like university platform and nobody can access. Let's try to do something open source. Let's try to gather a group to do that. So we have done those discussions where encouraging to shape groups, and that's what I think my work is, to shape groups that are enthusiastic about something, and give them tools to be able to do that, whether they want to do it through Iran chat or but we'll promote them anyways, because that's completely in the direction of what we were
Excellent.
trying to go. Yeah.
That's great. And then share with us, where can people connect with you? Tell us your website, your Instagram. Where can people follow your work?
Absolutely. Easiest on Instagram because I'm on it all, like pretty much all day. Mo.Rasoulipour is my profile ID name, and then web email, usually the least reliable, because I get so much spam that I
Yeah.
can't even know which one is real and which one's not. Um, uh, and website, yeah, website. There's a couple of forums, like the let's work together type of forums, but the best way to excuse me, get in touch is through one of the, like Iranian underline myths, Iranian underline epic, or my personal page, mo.rasoulipour on Instagram.
Excellent. Yeah, and I've spent a fair amount of time on your social media channels and on your website. There's so much beautiful visuals and stories, and that's where I bought the card game, of course. Um, Encourage anybody who's interested to check those out, and I'll certainly provide the links to all those channels anywhere where we publish this, so that hopefully people can engage and learn more if they'd like. And who knows, maybe you'll find some more collaborators and volunteers for whatever the next great project is.
Thank you so much. This was amazing conversation. Really talked about things that I hadn't even thought about before. So yeah,
Great.
this is amazing, stimulating. Thank you for being such an amazing interviewer. Excited to work with you on whatever you're embarking next. Work together on projects and things like that. And excited to see more of the interviews that you're doing with other people, other creators, and get inspired by that. So thank you so
Yeah,
much.
likewise. Thank
Yeah.
you for being here. Really appreciate your time, Mohammad John. The story is incredible. The visuals incredible. Feels like the work that you and others have put into this is amazing, and the way that you're representing Iranian culture and history and the diaspora. It's noteworthy. You know, I've been following it on social for a while. And I know some other people who have reached out to me and said, "Oh, I just bought this Iranian mythical
Oh,
card game thing," and I said, "I've seen that. That's awesome." So I hope it grows. I hope more people will play the game and engage with your work. Mohammad Rasoulipour, thank you so much for joining me on Bent Fig Media. It's been a pleasure, and I hope we'll stay in touch.
absolutely, Yashar. Thank you so much. This was delightful.
Thank you
Have a good
very
one.
much. Or
Bye.